The Interstellar University of Applied Xenomedicine was not just a school, it was the pinnacle of galactic medical education. Located aboard a space station orbiting the neutral system of Clethar Prime, University catered to over 400 species, each with radically different anatomies, environments, and biologies. Students floated in zero-G chambers, swam in gravity-free saline tanks, or projected neural thoughts via telepathic conduits. It was here that the best and brightest came to master the art of healing the galaxy's most complex life forms. And, now, for the first time in a generation, a human had enrolled in one of the most dangerous and advanced courses the school had to offer: field trauma simulation and emergency response. His name was Mason Trent, a human cadet from Earth, a Class 12. Death World. To most alien students, human meant erratic, fragile, loud, and dangerously unpredictable. Their biology was a confusing blend of contradictions: soft skin over reinforced bone, hyper-reactive immune systems that could defeat diseases with sheer rage, and a nervous system that somehow tolerated everything from venom to lava burns, according to rumors. But rumors weren't enough for the academic elite. They wanted proof, and Mason was about to give it to them. Mason arrived late to his first trauma simulation class, classic human timing. His boots clanged against the polished alloy of the lecture hall floor as he entered.
Ollie.
Dozens of alien students turned to look. At him, some had stalk eyes, others had sensory antennae, and one was a floating orb of light that pulsed in disapproval. The instructor, Valtorox, stood at the front. A towering Avari surgeon with 16 manipulator limbs and a reputation for harsh efficiency. Valtorox didn't believe in pleasantries-only results. "This is your new classmate," Valtorox announced in a gravelly tone, waving a limb toward Mason. "Species, Homo sapiens. World of origin, Terra. Background, Deathworlder. Choose your words carefully." A ripple of amusement passed through the class. Deathworlders were rare in academia, more often seen in security roles or elite combat units. Seeing one in a medical course, especially trauma sim, was unexpected. A tall, chitin-armored insectoid whispered to the gelatinous being next to it, "He'll break within minutes. Watch." Mason, ever perceptive, heard the remark, just grinned and dropped his bag. "I figured if I'm going to die learning something, might as well make it useful." There was an awkward silence. Instructor Valtorox, unimpressed, floated forward. "You are aware, Cadet Trent, that this simulation involves lethal-level trauma scenarios. Our environments adapt based on physiological thresholds. If your species lacks proper tolerance, let's find out," Mason interrupted.
Hey.
"Sign the waiver." Twice, actually. As the class went quiet again, but this time with a different tone, one of curiosity. Humans were known for many things: stubbornness, ingenuity, and an alarming lack of self-preservation. But Mason didn't seem reckless, just calm. Confident. Valtorox's eye clusters narrowed. "Very well. We'll begin with the Tarkalian collapse. Drill, simulated debris, multi-casualty rescue, expect injury. No teleportation, no regeneration, limited nanofields." He turned and slithered toward the simulation dome. "Follow me." As Mason walked with the others, he noticed the nervous glances, the occasional snickers, and one alien discreetly activating a vitals recording monitor. He was a novelty, a walking experiment. Inside the dome, the landscape shifted before them: an unstable mining tunnel filled with cracks, emergency lights, and flickering warning signs. The goal was clear: assess injuries, apply treatment, and extract all simulated victims before structural collapse. The catch? One member of the response team would be randomly selected as an unexpected casualty. It added realism and taught team-based. Triage. Mason didn't know it yet, but he was the chosen casualty. As the team entered, the simulation suddenly shook. Sirens screamed. Section of the tunnel's ceiling, composed of hard light matter, broke loose and slammed down directly onto Mason. The sound was sickening. Bones cracked. Blood splattered, and then silence. Mason's vitals flatlined on the central display. The other cadets froze. Even Valtorox leaned in, expression unreadable. Simulation override, halt, and but then. The heart monitor pinged. Once, then again. Roan followed. Mason's hand twitched. He rolled to his side, coughed out dust and blood, and winced. "Okay," he muttered, half laughing. That one really hurt. The entire alien class stared in disbelief. Mason Trent, the fragile-looking human from the Class 12 Death World, had just taken a full trauma collapse to the head and chest, gotten back up. The Tarkalian collapse drill was not for the faint of heart, designed to mimic the catastrophic conditions of a deep space mining disaster. The drill combined environmental hazards, multi-species victims, and unpredictable terrain into one chaotic scenario. For most students, it was a grueling but essential rite of passage, a way to prove themselves under pressure and showcase their adaptability. For Cadet Mason Trent, it had become something else entirely. The moment the simulated ceiling collapsed on him, the room went from competitive focus to stunned silence. The hard light structure had simulated over 500 kilograms of weight compressing his rib cage and striking his skull with a force that would have liquefied the cranial cavity of half the species in the room. The alien cadets had seen many things in their time at the university: dissolved torsos, snapped limbs, and radiation burns. But none had ever seen someone survive that kind of trauma, let alone get back up from it. For a few seconds, only sounds were the fading klaxons of the collapsing sim and the faint, eerie ping of Mason's heart monitor returning from flatline. Then came a cough, wet and ragged. Mason's hand twitched. His torso shifted. And then, against all logic, he sat up. "Son of a ... he groaned, spitting blood and what looked like a cracked molar into his gloved hand. Okay, that one hurt. Across the simulation control deck, Instructor Valtorok stood frozen. As an Avaria species renowned for calculating logic and emotionless observation, he rarely reacted to student injuries. But even he couldn't process what he was witnessing. The aliens stared. Some gasped. One cadet, a Narnic slime creature, slithered behind a boulder and fainted from sensory overload. Another, a crystalline Sorinthy, simply stood there with flashing panic lights shimmering from its exofacets. Mason checked his limbs methodically, one at a time. Shoulder, dislocated. Ribs, screaming in protest. Skull, probably cracked. Still, he forced himself to his feet with a pained grunt. "You okay?" Someone called hesitantly from the shadows, a Threx medic, with 6 eyes all blinking rapidly. "Nope," Mason said cheerfully. "But I'm upright. Let's finish the drill." That single line, half joke, half madness, was recorded, translated into 14 languages, and would later become a meme across the student body. Valtorox recovered first. "Cadet Trent, you were the simulated primary casualty. This scenario required you to be incapacitated. Your continued participation invalidates protocol." Mason leaned against a simulated girder and gave a thumbs up. "Then give me a 0. I'll walk out of here anyway." It was defiance. Not rebellion, not arrogance, just unfiltered human tenacity. He didn't say it with pride. He said it because to him it was normal. The alien cadets didn't know what to make of it. One asked, "Are all humans like this?" Another replied, "I don't know. I heard some of them run to ward. Natural disasters for fun." They watched as Mason limped over to a simulated victim and began applying pressure to a leg wound with nothing but a stripped sleeve from his uniform. His hands trembled. His breath came in gasps, but he kept going. And that's when something shifted. For the first time, the class no longer saw a death worlder. They didn't see a joke or a brute species pretending to be intelligent. They saw a medic. A broken, bloodied one, but a medic nonetheless. When the simulation ended, Mason had treated 2 victims and assisted a third before collapsing from simulated blood loss. The room remained silent for a long time. After the lights returned to normal, Valtorox finally spoke, voice flat. "Cadet Trent has demonstrated biological parameters not accounted for in this version of the simulator. I will submit a report." Then, to the amazement of every alien present, Valtorox added, "Well done." It was the closest the Avari instructor had ever come to praise. Mason was carried to the medical bay by two robotic stretchers. As he faded in and out of consciousness, he smiled. Bet I still passed. The moment became legend before he even woke up. Within hours, word of the event spread across the university. Alien students who'd once mocked Earthlings now whispered about them with wide eyes. The myths were being confirmed in real time. Humans didn't just survive death worlds. They took the pain, laughed at it, and kept walking. And for the alien medical school, the age of disbelief was officially over. Mason Trent awoke in the Interstellar University's med bay, with the sterile taste of synth oxygen in his mouth and the dull hum of medical drones hovering above him. Light filtered through a semi-transparent gel screen, and his body screamed, with every pulse of his heart. But he was alive. Again, the med bay was unusually full, not with patients, but observers. Students from every department had packed into the viewing gallery above, whispering, watching, taking notes. Some brought biometric scanners. Others carried sketch pads or floated with blinking ocular modules. To them, Mason wasn't just a cadet. Anymore, he was a specimen. The scans are surreal. Internal bleeding in 3 separate zones, 2 cracked ribs, minor concussion, a partially dislocated shoulder, and a shallow skull fracture near the parietal lobe. Any one of those injuries could have killed in Shalty or left a Flarnick in a regenerative coma. But Mason Trent was sitting up and asking for a sandwich. Dr. Lishfa, 6-skilled Aquarian physician with a glowing cranial fin, reviewed the readings. For the 3rd time before floating toward Mason's bed. I don't understand, she said, tapping the display. Your body should have gone into deep shock. You suffered compressive trauma across multiple organ systems. Your blood loss threshold exceeded 38%. Most species would be brain dead. Mason blinked. Is this the part where you guys clone me or poke my spleen? Lishfa stared. Do you feel normal? Not even a little bit, Mason replied, holding his side. But if you got some ice in a protein bar, I'll walk it off. One of the students in the gallery fainted. Another, some kind of photosynthetic species, literally changed colors in disbelief. To them, pain meant limits. Pain meant stop. But Mason wore his injuries like old clothes, uncomfortable, yes, but manageable. The mystery wasn't just how Mason survived, it was how humans were wired to endure. Lishfa opened a new diagnostic thread on the central interface. Subject. Displays abnormal neurochemical responses to trauma. Pain thresholds fluctuate based on emotional state. Endorphin and cortisol levels suggest a capacity for compartmentalized agony. ... She trailed off. Mason had pulled out his foreline and was trying to stand. What are you doing? She gasped. Stretching. My spine feels like a crushed soda can. Dr. Lishva moved to restrain him gently, but Mason waved her off. Back on Earth, we call this a minor case of Tuesday. Valtorox entered at that moment, flanked by 2 other professors. Their neural implants were glowing, silently transmitting data to the university's biological archives. Valtorox's voice was grave. You are stable for now. But what you've demonstrated, this is not mere stubbornness. Your biology contradicts 3 centuries of standardized trauma response protocols. Cool, Mason said. Do I still get a passing grade? One of the professors, a feathery Zarthome biologist, chirped, You should be dead, human. Nah. Negotiating grades? To that, Mason just shrugged. Yeah, well, humans die loud but not fast. There's a difference. And he wasn't wrong. Earth's evolutionary history was built on punishment volcanoes, predators, freezing tundras, diseases with names that sounded like curses. Human ancestors hadn't thrived despite pain. They'd thrived because of it. Pain for them wasn't just a warning. It was fuel. The aliens studied his brain scans in awe. A near-instant flood of adrenaline during trauma, secondary chemical surge after consciousness loss, and most fascinating, laughter response during peak suffering. Is it a form of self-preservation? Lishva asked aloud. This humor? Valtorox nodded slowly. Or perhaps madness refined into a survival mechanism. The viewing gallery erupted with data sharing. Mason's vitals were uploaded anonymously into the galactic academic net. Several alien universities requested permission to observe him in future drills. Others offered genetic analysis contracts. One particularly intense robotic species asked to sponsor his career, but Mason was still human, still tired, and still annoyed that nobody had offered him a coffee yet. He leaned back into the diagnostic bed, watching as 3 alien medics tried to argue about whether his spleen had a backup function. "You guys are overthinking it," he muttered. "Pain hurts. We just keep going anyway." That sentence was later cited in at least 9 research papers and translated into over 60 languages. At that moment, every alien in the room realized the truth. Humans were not the strongest, not the fastest, and not even the smartest species in the galaxy. But they were something else entirely. They were built to endure the impossible and laugh afterward, and that made them dangerous in a way no warship or weapon ever could. By now, Mason Trent's name echoed through every hallway, laboratory, and lecture chamber of the Interstellar University of Applied Xenomedicine. No longer was he just the human cadet, he was the human. The one who got crushed in a high-fidelity trauma sim and then stood up. The one who laughed through cracked ribs. The one whose scans baffled half the medical faculty and broke 3 standard diagnostic protocols. He had gone from curiosity to legend. And legends, as always, draw challengers. Some students refused to believe what they saw. Others whispered that the simulation must have malfunctioned. Some speculated genetic modifications, nanotech implants, or banned stimulants. No one believed someone could just shrug off death and ask for a sandwich. The murmurs turned into proposals. The proposals turned into votes, and soon, the faculty agreed to settle it once and for all. A live demonstration. No simulations, no hard light projections, real trauma response exercise under real battlefield conditions. It would be a controlled trial. Course supervised, monitored, and contained within the orbiting Skull tactical range, a retired asteroid warbase used for emergency training. But everything else? Real, live fire. Real wounds. Real consequences. Each cadet team would be dropped into separate sections of the facility. Their mission: rescue a wounded diplomat under hostile fire, treat injuries with limited supplies, and extract before being overwhelmed. Mason didn't hesitate. He just asked one question: how fast can I get duct tape? While others loaded advanced nano-kits, regeneration packs, and complex bioscanners, Mason packed a roll of Terran duct tape, a protein bar, 2 adrenaline injectors, and a stained military field manual from a century-old Earth conflict. The other teams laughed until the simulation began. The drop went bad instantly, while the other cadets glided down in sleek containment orbs. Mason's drop pod clipped a protruding tower, spun wildly, and smashed into the deck with bone-jarring force. Cameras picked up a cloud of dust and a muffle that's gonna bruise. Instructors moved to pause the exercise, but Mason's voice came through the comms, "I'm good. Just dislocated the pod, not the bones." He stumbled out of the wreckage, found his objective, and immediately assessed the situation. His target: a wounded 600-pound Takan diplomat with 3 leaking organs, crushed plating, and respiratory damage. Worse, the diplomat's species used methane to breathe, and the facility was venting oxygen. Every team had to treat and extract their subject. Every team had access to environment stabilizers. Mason didn't. His stabilizer broke on impact, so he improvised. He shoved a vent pipe into the floor, wrapped it with duct tape, and jammed it into the diplomat's breathing port. The seal was crude, ugly. It worked. Then came the enemy drones, hovering AI sentries that fired low-yield plasma blasts. Most teams scattered. Some abandoned their subjects to save themselves. Mason didn't flinch. He carried the Takan at his back, half dragging, half crawling. He made his way through collapsing corridors and pulsing emergency lights, shielding the diplomat with his body as plasma blasts sizzled past. His skin blistered. One shot grazed his calf and left it charred. Another clipped his shoulder. He kept going. The final hallway was blocked by debris. Mason threw his last adrenaline injector into his own leg, lifted the rubble with a roar, and then collapsed under the diplomat just before the exit beacon activated. Extraction teams rushed in. He'd passed out. Arm wrapped around the diplomat's body like a shield. When Mason awoke in the medical bay again, he found himself surrounded by faculty. Veltorox stood at the center, his voice unusually slow and deliberate. You did not follow the ideal protocol. Your stabilizer failed. You had insufficient tools. And yet, your subject survived. You endured direct fire. And you carried him 500 meters. On fire. Mason croaked, "How's the Taken?" "The diplomat's vitals are stable. He has requested to nominate you for planetary citizenship." Mason blinked. "Does it come with snacks?" Laughter. Actual laughter from professors who hadn't cracked a smile in decades. Mason's performance changed everything. His run wasn't just a freak accident of biology, it was evidence that humans had an edge no medical scanner could measure. A refusal to stop. A capacity to function through trauma. A brain wired not to surrender, but to fight even when the body failed. Word spread. Alien universities requested collaboration on Terran durability studies. Medical textbooks were rewritten to include a new diagnostic anomaly. The Trent response syndrome. The ability to operate under conditions that should result in unconsciousness or death. Back at the Interstellar University, the cadets now looked at Mason differently. Not with pity, not even with curiosity, but with awe. He wasn't just the survivor of a freak accident. He was proof that humanity was terrifying, for reasons no weapon could replicate, and the galaxy was just starting to realize it. In the weeks that followed the live trauma response challenge, Cadet Mason Trent became more than a name. He became a phenomenon. The Interstellar University of Applied Xenomedicine, a place once rooted in hard logic and biological tradition, now found itself grappling with a question it had never asked before. What happens when your understanding of suffering is obsolete? Mason had done more than survive a simulated collapse, more than patch together a dying diplomat with duct tape and adrenaline. More than carry 600 pounds of alien flesh through fire, he had shattered assumptions about biology, about death, and most of all, about humans. It started with the medbay footage, clips of Mason regaining consciousness, bandaged head to toe. Joking with the medical staff went viral across the university's internal network. His final act, passing out with his arms still wrapped protectively around the eunuch diplomat, was replayed hundreds of times in classrooms and auditoriums. Alien cadets who once mocked Earth as primitive were now studying Terran physiology. Departments launched comparative research studies into human tissue. One professor offered an open lecture titled "Pain as Fuel: The Human Evolutionary Paradox." Another dissected Mason's medical history at broken bones in childhood. 2 concussions from contact sports, 1 infection that nearly killed him at age 12, and concluded, "This species is not reckless. They're just built different." Even more astounding were the psychological profiles. Mason's trauma tolerance wasn't just a fluke, it was embedded in the Terran psyche. Most species retreated from pain. Humans planned around it, expected it, even trained through it. In fact, records from Earth showed children playing games that simulated injury, stress, and warfare, from tag to paintball to something called rugby, which one alien called voluntary battlefield brawling without armor. The revelation disturbed the galaxy's most elite healers. If pain for most species was a warning to stop, for humans, it was simply a status update soon. Mason was flooded with invitations, not from just universities, but military research divisions, medical innovation, think tanks, exploratory corps, and even planetary defense organizations. One message simply. Read, "We want to study what happens when you don't get back up, because so far we've never seen it." Chief Medical Officer Lorvon 6, but Mason didn't accept any of the offers. He stayed at the university, quietly finishing his coursework, attending lectures, and helping younger cadets practice simulations. To him, he wasn't special. He was just a Terran who happened to not die at the right time. The faculty disagreed. Veltorox, a being who once doubted the inclusion of Deathworlders in medical sciences, called a full faculty assembly. There, in a speech broadcast live across the university, he declared, "We once believed pain defined limits, that injury demanded surrender, that survival was a gift given to the biologically superior. But now we understand. Survival is a choice, and no species has chosen it harder than humanity." The university created a new memorial, not for those lost in conflict or accident, but for those who endured the impossible. They named it the Wall of Survival. Mason Trent's name was the first engraved. Beneath it, quote translated into 143 languages, read, "I hurt. So, what? Let's finish the job." Alien students stood before that wall for hours, reading, rereading, trying to understand what kind of creature said those words after nearly dying and meant them. Back on Earth, Mason's story became a symbol. His image limping out of fire, bloodied and grinning, was turned into posters, recruitment videos, and even a holographic monument in front of the Terran embassy on Clethar Prime. But Mason didn't care about that. He cared about the message. He began teaching, quietly, humbly, running unofficial night classes for alien cadets who wanted to understand human resilience, not just physically, but emotionally. He told stories of human explorers who amputated limbs with pocket knives, of medics in ancient wars who held arteries shut with their bare fingers, of mothers who lifted collapsed buildings to save their children, of hikers who chewed through their own ropes to survive avalanches. The alien cadets listened in silence. They no longer questioned why humans were feared. They now understood why humanity was respected, not for their ships, not for their weapons, not even for their technology, but because, in the face of death, humans got up anyway. And so, long after Mason graduated, the legend remained. Future cadets would whisper about the Terran who couldn't die. The simulations were redesigned to account for Trent variables, unpredictable survivability traits. Medical textbooks now included a section titled Terran Anomalies, Adaptation Through Adversity. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, whenever a rescue mission looked hopeless, a young alien medic would remember the story of a stubborn human with broken ribs, a roll of duct tape, and a grin full of blood, and they would whisper to themselves, "I hurt. So what? Let's finish the job."